Welcome back to Chapter 2, Breaking Barriers.
We've not got one guest, but we've got two guests today. And we haven't got Has Kareem, though, so we kind of made up for it. We have got the wonderful Anna Kessel and Fadumo Olow. And what do they do, Mariam Naz?
Well, the pair of them work for the Women's Telegraph section that's been causing all the hype. Well, I guess we're going to have a lot of fun talking to them today about not just diversity in the newspaper industry, but also their own personal journeys.
Exactly, and we're not only covering the women and sport base, not only that side, but we're also covering ethnicity and that kind of stuff, if I don't knock my microphone over. But yeah, it's going to be a bloody good episode.
I don't want no disrespect. Cop no protect, sign a check.
So after our brief introduction, which we will record after this video, we are joined by Anna Kessel and Fadumo Olow. I hope I haven't butchered your names there, guys. For those who don't know you guys and what you're doing at the moment, Anna, do you want to just give us a brief explanation of what you guys do at the moment?
So I'm editor of Telegraph Women's Sports, which is quite a new venture. It was only launched in March last year.
Yeah, so my name is Fadumo. I'm the social media editor at the Telegraph Women's Sports. Fairly new into my role. I know Anna started it last year with the rest of the team, or just over a year ago. But I started early on just using kind of digital and multimedia to kind of get the voice across of women in sport.
Yeah, so obviously you guys have been working together for quite a while. Can you tell us a bit more, look before that, how maybe individually you got into the industry? I think we just probably start with Fadumo, if that's okay.
Yeah, I guess my route into sport has been somewhat unconventional, and I say so because I'm very much at the start of it. So I was actually previously a youth worker in my role, my day-to-day job, and I went to university to study sport and exercise sciences with the intention of going into teaching, and then realised very quickly on I didn't actually like teaching. So I was like, oh, I need to come up with something else. I always had a genuine passion and interest for sports. And was kind of quite talkative and always had something to say. So I kind of was like, maybe I should put the two together. And just like most people in sports, I realized very quickly that it is very hard to get any form of experience as such. So I, alongside one of my really good friends called Lippa, put together a podcast called I Think She's Offside, which is about bringing underrepresented conversations in women's sports to life. And we did that more so over the fact that we just weren't able to get onto different starter schemes. So we applied for every scheme possible and just weren't getting onto any of them.
Yeah, first of all, I just want to say it is so cool that Fadumo's joined us. We haven't been working together for ages because she only joined us in February. And a really exciting period in the whole venture, really, because we were coming up to a year anniversary. But then, of course, the pandemic and lockdown hit. So somebody who's a new member of the team has had to contend with so many additional challenges, and she's just been brilliant and really taken us to a different level. And I think, you mentioned that we're from different generations, and I think it's so cool to be able to work with people coming with different ideas and different experiences and different skill sets in this way, because print journalism has to change. It doesn't work without digital journalism anymore. And so, yeah, the things that Fadumo's bringing right now are really exciting and cool, and yeah, we're enjoying it. In terms of how I got into sports journalism, a bit like Fadumo, also quite unconventional. I was someone who was not into sport at school. I bunked all of my PE lessons. And I suppose for me, sport was just something that had a lot of problems associated with it. My dad is South African, and so for me growing up, I really saw sport as often very nationalistic, and often used as a political tool by people in all sorts of dodgy governments, whether that was the South African apartheid system or in my mum's case, she's Czech, and so she'd grown up in the sort of shadow of Nazism and the way that sport was used by the Third Reich to oppress people. And then both of them come into London and meeting, and then it was 70s, 80s London, football hooliganism, a lot of racism and violence, and certainly not a space for women or or people of colour either. So yeah, a lot of reasons not to like sport when I was growing up. But despite all of that, I went to a school that was mad about Arsenal and just sort of fell in love with the club and that whole era and Ian Wright and what, you know, exciting goal scoring, and sort of got swept up in it, I suppose. And it went from there. You know, I wrote to a bunch of papers and asked if I could write about sport for them, if I could come and do work experience. None of them replied, apart from the Observer, who took me on for work experience. And then I didn't leave. I literally was at the Observer, and then it merged with the Guardian for like 15 years before I joined the Telegraph.
Yeah, so it's both of you have like your different story to get into the same place eventually and meet. So we'll start with you, Anna. So you mentioned that you said print journalism needs to change. It needs this digital side of it. How have you guys like sort of adapted as a newspaper? Like, I'm going to be brutally honest here. I don't know that many people my age who reads a newspaper. How do you translate it to a newer audience in that respect? We'll start with you, Anna.
Yeah, I think for women's sport in particular, it really lends itself to a digital platform, because for so long women's sports stories were being ignored. So the only way you could really follow the sport was through social media and these organic communities of women's sports fans and athletes themselves that were kind of springing up and sharing stories and ideas and views. So in a way, it's a really natural partner, and it's almost the reverse. Like we've had to come on a journey to be able to get women's sport into the traditional way of media coverage, into print. And it's quite funny because I think some of the old school journalists, not particularly at the Telegraph but everywhere, have a big thing about how their story has to be in print. That's a big thing, and if it just goes online then it's somehow a lesser story. But I think for me and many others feel like online is the place to be. That's where you're going to get the eyeballs, and that's why Fadumo's role is so exciting, because it's not just online, it's being amplified through social and through all these different mediums and mechanisms and different platforms, Snapchat, TikTok, Insta, Twitter. That's really powerful.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I love how Anna said that, you know, journalists love to get their ideas in paper. I didn't even know that was a thing. Like, to me, I'm just like, I take a byline wherever I get it. I'm not really that honest. Which is, I've never really been that. And like you, I've never been like a type of person to, growing up, just wasn't much of a newspaper reader. And obviously, like, other than my parents were, because we just used to get the paper in our neighborhood. But other than that, I don't remember like people around me actively like going to get newspapers and stuff. And I feel like online is just such a different world. It's like, you know, you've got that immediate access with players. Like, I remember, you know, you tweet out something and then a footballer might respond out of the fact that they just find it humorous. So you just cut all those connections out. So I do think online platforms, it's a lot more for that. And I think print is trying to catch up with that. And I think, like, you know, at Telegraph Women's Sports, it's so good that we have that, you know, relationship where, like, me and the other writers like Fiona, Molly, Katie, and everyone else on the team, where we could just, you know, share ideas. They are happy to have it whatever way, like, you know, we think it's best to put it online. So, and I think it's nice to be part of a project that equally wants, like, sees social media as an equal to print, because it's just as important to get the voice out. And like Anna said, women's sports hasn't been at the forefront for a lot of things, but it is starting to be now. And sometimes there are a lot more digital spaces out there than there are spaces in print. So getting, you know, the stories out there is probably a lot more important.
I suppose the one thing I'd add to it is that, well, first of all, I'm not dissing print, because I think there's something so beautiful about seeing, and I understand, like, especially when you're starting out, if you see your byline in print, that's a real moment, or it has been traditionally, like, oh wow, it's actually in the paper, like my granddad can read it or whatever. But I think there is also something about the design element that goes into print, and we see it especially in the monthly supplement that we produce. The designers, the way that they work with colour on the page is phenomenal, and it really elevates the stories that we're doing. I don't know if you saw the recent cover of our Black Lives Matter supplement.
Yeah, it was amazing.
Yeah, the illustration, the design that went into it. So they asked me to get Dina Asher-Smith, who wrote the leading column for the supplement. They asked me to ask her to handwrite out some of the quotes and then scan them over, and then they incorporated her handwriting into the design, which was so cool. And I suppose for me, it's just about making sure that any kind of beautiful print design work or anything that's beautiful to do with print then gets translated into digital, so that you don't lose that that energy and that creativity, that the two are kind of working together more. I think that's really important.
In terms of newspapers in general, do you feel as if the kind of contributions we've had, do you feel it's more diverse, especially I guess for you guys, because we've got Fadumo working on, and we've got wonderful women like her, and it's not something we've had in the past. How sort of inspiring is it, I guess I would ask Fadumo, to be a part of something so powerful, especially what's going on in the world right now in terms of Black Lives Matter and other political movements, and then being able to actually use your own job and be a part of that.
Yeah, no, I think it's really good. I think Black Lives Matter has probably been an example of like generally being in a position and feeling, I think for a while, I think at the start of the movement, I think I just felt a bit frustrated, more so at myself, and like with everything going on, I just felt a bit, have the feeling of a lot of people and a lot of my friends just felt a bit useless, like, I don't know what I can do in that kind of situation. But, being able to put together the Black Lives Supplement with the rest of the team was just such a good feeling, and just seeing, the works of so many athletes and even people that, that work in the fitness industry that wouldn't necessarily have that profile, but were given it for a supplement. Now that just really, like, for me, meant a lot, and it's just something that I hope that we can continue. But I think diversity, not just in in skin color, and it's also in background and life experiences, is equally important to a newsroom, and it's something that I think newsrooms are realizing that they don't have and that they need to change. And I think something like Black Lives Matter really did put that at the forefront, because a lot of people are kind of having to look in on themselves and see, do we have those voices to represent our issues, and if we don't, what can we do to make them better? So yeah, I do feel that it is changing, and it is something that we can do. And I also know, like, I'm lucky that I'm at a newspaper and I work with a team who are like mega supportive, and will take on any ideas that I think, or like tell me, if I need to do anything. I also hope that I can do that for other young people. I know that young people have reached out to me who are from different ethnic backgrounds, but relate to the fact that I am from an ethnic minority background, and they're like, oh, like, if you got it, maybe so can we. And it's kind of making them realize the steps in between aren't actually as hard as it seems, and it's like people aren't that far out of reach. And I definitely believe in like celebrating Black joy and ethnic minority joy as much as we do talk about the struggles that that we've had and the reality of those struggles. But I do think having positive voices is equally important, if not more, because that's what will really inspire and motivate people to go on and, like, follow in those footsteps. And you want it to be a case where it's not an anomaly that there's only one Black person in the room, or one Asian person in the room. You want it to be a case where it's just normalized, that the fact that you are from an ethnic minority race isn't really a big thing. It's just the fact that you're there. It's important.
It definitely is, and I think the more we have people of colour and people who are able to speak about their experiences, the more we're actually inspiring the next generation. And so I would ask Anna, having sort of been in the industry for a while now, do you feel like it's getting more diverse, that we are actually paying attention to more people of colour, and do you feel
and women as well?
Women in particular, given that you guys work so sort of strongly with the Telegraph section for women's sport?
Yeah, I have to say, I mean, yes, things are changing, definitely, and that's great to see, and particularly in like the last couple of years, I've definitely seen more Black sports writers in particular, but then also like seeing the careers take off of people like Reshmin and others is great. But you know what, it's still so few and far between. And when I think about, I've been in this industry for 16 years, and at the beginning it was, I think sometimes things that are so obvious to us now were not even conversations before. So when I started out, it wasn't even a conversation about the fact that there weren't any women in the sports media industry, or that or that there wasn't coverage of women's sport. People just didn't even bother to talk about it because it didn't even occur to them. Like the whole concept of sexism in football wasn't on the agenda. It wasn't part of the diversity and inclusion strategy. So those kind of things have changed, but then, which is good, but those things are so obvious. Like, how could that ever be the case in the first place? And the fact that we're only really belatedly starting to talk about ethnicity as part of that diversity. So before, when we used to talk about diversity, basically what people meant was white women, white able-bodied women, and I think still too often that is still the case. You know, like when you look at a judging panel or a panel of speakers or whatever, it's not really diverse, just because one person is different to the other, I don't know, 8 white able-bodied men that are on the panel. So yeah, there's too much of this sort of, there's one woman, or there's one person from an ethnic minority, and therefore that represents all of diversity. And I think that attitude really has to change, and there's still not enough understanding of what diversity really brings and the benefits of it. That yeah, people still see it as a sort of a moral and irritating obligation that's like a tick box exercise. I find that really frustrating.
Yeah, and I'm gonna, obviously as a white male, this is gonna sound really bad, but I'm just gonna play devil's advocate here. So in terms of sort of like the diversity and inclusion system, it's something which has had to happen for a long time. But do you think that there could be a danger of potentially overcompensating in terms of basing ethnicity over skill?
I think that's the perception that I hear that all the time.
Yeah.
The amount of times over the last couple of years I've heard, and I used to get it even as a white woman, people would say, oh, you've only got that story because you're a woman, that's why you were given it.
Yeah.
And I still hear it today. You hear it a lot in broadcasting in particular. There was like this famous case of who was it that was let go at the BBC recently? Was it Mark Chapman? No,
Not really sure.
it was I can't remember. Anyway, and a load of people tweeted and said, oh, the only reason that, you know, you've been made redundant is because they're going to get like young black people in, or they're looking for diversity or whatever. So I think that's the sort of constant, and it's no different to that really racist ideology of the 70s where they're like, oh, they're going to take your jobs and all the rest of it. It's exactly the same. So yeah, I hate that attitude. I think it's nonsense. If you look across the industry, it is, you know, overwhelmingly white and male still. And if you show me the stats when white able-bodied men start to be in the minority and under threat, then I think start worrying about them.
Yeah. Just to make that clear, that is not my attitude. I'm just going to put it out.
No, I know, but you're right to point it out, right? Because I hear that all the time.
I feel like you're right, that had to happen. I've got it so many times where they're like, well, if, you know, you're Pakistani, you're Asian, and you're a girl. Wow, you know, you're definitely going to get this sort of job or this opportunity, where it's almost like, well, you know, some of us have worked hard to get where we are, and we've literally had to work twice as hard as men sometimes. So, you know, it's not always just because we're brown or black or, you know, a certain gender that it's going to give us more of an opportunity. I think whenever I hear people say, oh, you know, it's because you're a woman and, you know, they already have like 50 other men, it is frustrating, and it definitely feels like there's still such a long way to go, because it's almost like a very sort of basic understanding. Okay, well, you know, you're a woman, that's great. That means that we're, you know, equal, we're diverse, but that's really not it. There's clearly still quite a lot of work to do.
What's your thoughts on that attitude then, Fadumo?
Yeah, I definitely agree with what Anna's saying. I think more so what people forget is like, it's not about, you know, bringing more, like, you know, black people or Asian people into the room. It's just literally leveling the playing field. And that's like, you know, the fact that the majority of opportunities that exist within sport are within inner London, and they require for you to go out and, you know, you can complete your degree, but you might not get a job because you don't have a NCTJ, and then for that you might need you need to pay like £6 for that. And then if you come from a socio-economical background where you don't have that money, because statistically ethnic minority backgrounds don't have that financial freedom to pay for this extra thing, you're already at a disadvantage. So essentially what this is to bring more people into sport. It's not saying that we're lowering the bar and saying, therefore, you know, black people are coming in or Asian people are coming in because the bar's a lot lower. It's basically saying we're going to give them more of the opportunity, give them other route into the industry, because the traditional routes haven't been favoured for them in the first place. Because, you know, asking people to go out and get qualifications and get them to do, you know, free internships for a year, that does not work in the favour of people from different socioeconomical backgrounds, or for the average working class family. So it's essentially just open a different door, but for the same room, and that's all it is. And as time goes on, you will see, hopefully, like people of colour come into the room, or people from rich and ethnic diversity background. But it's not a case of saying we're lowering the bar and therefore, you know, Black and Asian people are coming into the room and they're taking part of the conversation. It is also doing it for women. You know, white women are also part of that conversation. People with disabilities are also part of that conversation. There are a lot of people outside of the average, you know, middle class white man who's been in the industry for a very long time, who've had difficulties to get into the space, and all it is trying to do is trying to open another route for them to get into that same space and making it possible for that to happen.
Absolutely. And finally, I think this will be the final question. Do you think it, to both of you, do you think it sort of needs to change at the top before we can sort of really start to ramp up this equal and diverse room that we do need to represent society?
Yeah, I do, because it's about the decision makers. Too often the whole like diversity and inclusion project is like a kind of marginalised department which maybe doesn't have the same amount of power. I mean, there's one sports governing body, for example, who have a D&I person. They have no budget. So how are they going to make a change? You know, that just doesn't make any sense. So, you know, when you're talking about diversity, it's got to run genuinely through everything that you're doing. And yeah, it's very hard to make that change because people don't want to give up their power. They don't want to. They don't want to share it with anybody, and they don't necessarily see a problem in the first place. And until those people have their minds changed, and I hope the whole Black Lives Matter movement that's happening right now is starting to have a really powerful effect in that way.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I think it could be a lot quicker, and it's something I really dislike the bottom-up process that people try to do with diversity. Is that every single diversity scheme you come across will always be an entry level, which makes no sense, because that's kind of supporting the narrative that people from ethnic minority backgrounds are less skilled, therefore they need to start at essentially the bottom of the task level, and that's not necessarily the case. I think you need to also give opportunity to people at all levels, and, you know, give that entry point to all levels. And it's not a case of, you know, we're bringing in people from different ethnic backgrounds, or we're bringing in more women because we're basically saying that we need, and that's going to get rid of all the positions for men. That's not the case. It's not like we're not trying to make men the minority in this kind of case. It's just leveling the playing field and giving people the exposure that's needed. Because I think at the end of the day, when you do have the same people from a similar kind of background and similar kind of upbringing, there's only so many stories that will be written, that can be rewritten in different ways, and you need that diversity in experience, in thought, in writing style, and that will essentially bring in so many more people. So even from a, you know, business perspective, it ends up working well eventually. And it's just, you know, you do need to have that faith from the top, from the middle, from the bottom, and people need to collectively buy in to the fact that situations at the moment are weighed against women, and are more so weighed against women from ethnic minority backgrounds, and that needs to change massively.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to finish. Anything else from you, Naz?
No, I think it's we've kind of covered everything. I'm really glad we've had this conversation, because I feel like I've been quite enlightened. So thank you guys both.
Yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure having you guys here to talk about anything. So where can we find you guys? On Twitter, Instagram, that kind of stuff, Anna?
Yeah, Twitter. Women's Sport is the handle for Telegraph Women's Sport, and mine's Anna_Kessel.
And for you, Fadumo?
Yeah, so Twitter for Telegraph Women's Sports, Telegraph Women's Sports on Instagram, and then just Fadumo_Olow for my own socials, which is mainly just a retweet of the Telegraph page anyway. So.
Yeah, so everyone go drop.
No, it's not.
Occasionally, like, ranting about lots of other things in between that. But yeah.
Yeah, everyone go drop those to a follow and subscribe to the TotalSport channel to get some more really in-depth and interesting content coming out to you soon. Subscribe. Thank you very much, and we'll see you next time.